Hi, everybody. Welcome. If you are joining us for the first time, my name is Sherston Pugh, and I'm an Associate Director of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program in Columbia University's School of Professional Studies. I'm also an alum of the program, too. This is our second NECR Alumni Career Deep Dive series of this academic year. So, welcome and thank you for joining us. Each month, we host one of our alumni, and they'll spend part of the hour breaking down their career trajectory to help us better understand the many different paths that a career in conflict resolution can go down. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Kalika Thomas, who graduated from the program in 2011. Following Kalika's presentation, there will be plenty of time for Q&A, so please don't hesitate to use the Q&A box to share your question with us at any time, and at the end, I will read them. So please don't hesitate, and also know that we will be recording the session. We're already recording, so note that. And this recording will be available on the NECR website as well as our YouTube channel soon, so you can log into those and you can also share those with others. And so, without further ado, welcome, Kalika. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure so far, and I only anticipate wonderful things that I have the opportunity to share with our guests tonight. Um, as mentioned, my name is Kalika Thomas, and I am currently a New York City public educator. I had the pleasure of graduating from the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Master of Science program in 2011. So since then, I have decided to remain in education, both as a classroom teacher, as a peer instructional coach, as a mediator, and most recently also as a trainer. So just a little background history on how that work overlaps with my experiences through the program. I've been able to also lead community circles. So I am also a trained community circle keeper. That entails that I bring together different stakeholders, both within schools, such as the principal, students, parents, and we come together as a group to share our truths, our story. That allows us to connect and really bring forth a school's vision and personal statement. I also have the opportunity uh, to mediate cases through a Bronx Community Mediation Center here. And I would definitely take an opportunity tonight to discuss a lot more what that looks like in my work tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that great introduction. And maybe let's rewind a little bit back, go back in history. Can you tell us about what led you to the NECR program? How did you find it?
Absolutely. So I found the NECR program in its year of inception. It was 2008, and I had been searching for a master's program that would allow me to become a problem solver in the classroom, and also, more importantly, a problem solver within the community that schools embrace. I noticed that throughout my daily practice of interacting with students, interacting with parents, interacting with leadership, interacting with leadership's leadership, that something was missing. And what was missing was a bridge between pedagogy and resolving problems. Educators, we pride ourselves on resolving problems, so much so where we often use instructional practices to model for our students how they may use the skills learned in a classroom within their broader communities. So I looked around, I read articles to try to find a program that would take my skill set as an educator. I asked around. I even considered returning to my alma mater, Florida State University, and nothing quite spoke to me. I knew that getting an additional degree in education could be an option, and it seemed quite the norm. And I was really looking for something, again, that would allow me to stand out from my colleagues. So uh, a good friend of mine said, well, why don't you look into Teachers College again? And I looked into Teachers College and I found an organization, ICCR, and I learned that they had programs around mediation, workshops that entailed managing your emotions. And I said, this is ideal. Because if I am having trouble finding a master's program that really details what I'm looking for, if I'm having difficulty articulating that, this seems to be a possible avenue that would support me strengthening my abilities to effectively communicate my strengths, my weaknesses, opportunities that I have to strengthen my communities and any barriers. And so it was through that program and through the writings that I came across Dr. Beth Fisher Yoshida's articles, and I was sold. I said, "Wow, here's a woman. She's, has a background in the schools and education and special education, which was becoming an increasing topic of interest for me. And it was that kind of personal connection, that ability to look out and see here's someone who has taken her experiences from the classroom and is doing the work abroad, doing the work locally. And so I thought, here's a model that I could aspire to. And so that one-on-one connection with someone who I haven't met yet, but I could identify with, I could see myself in that person, led me to want to know more. And so I attended information sessions, decided to apply, and I was fortunate to become a member of the first starting class. So in 2008, one of the first members to start taking classes in this program. And at that time, we were still part of the School of Continuing Education. So now we're now the School of Professional Studies. So that's a testament of the work that this program allows you to learn and develop.
Can you tell us a little bit more too about what clicked for you when you were studying in the program? Were there any factors that helped you commit to this pursuit, especially in being part of the first cohort?
Absolutely. So even with applying and being accepted, attending class, one would hope that I remain committed. Um, and what really clicked for me was a class with Professor Bartoli, and it was our introduction to conflict and like conflict resolution. And his personal story of being someone who came to the country, spoke Italian, had not learned English, and learned English through the public library system. He recalled in detail for us, in a very transparent manner, attending the public library and signing up for English services. And when he made the connection that it was literature, that it was free programming, so programming that was accessible for him, and his ability to be transparent about his areas of need so that he could navigate a country, that clicked for me because I'm a literature major. Um, I teach English language arts. So having my first class and the professor conveyed to me that it was a library that gave him an avenue, again, to make his way in a new country because now he's able to acquire the language that was predominantly used in the country. That enabled him to create networks for himself and networks that would empower himself and therefore he could empower his communities. So hearing that story of now this gentleman who's teaching a class in a master's program, having started in this country as a non-English speaker really clicked for me. And then moreover, at that time, I had a student who was a non-English speaker, and my training um, and my educational background as a teacher had not fully equipped me with the skills to help this student um, acquire the language. And so hearing um, this adult man's perspective and his story gave me hope that if I could stick with this student and find resources to help him acquire the language, that he could one day be someone that's a professor at a university, speaking to someone like me, trying to find ways to make the world a better place. So seeing my student and my first professor is what really clicked, and I felt like I was at home.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so wonderful to hear. I didn't know that story. And sort of think as we're still thinking back on your time as a student, could you tell us what your capstone topic was when you were in the program? And did any of the work that you did on your capstone support or influence your career at all?
Absolutely. So my capstone topic was teacher training in post-conflict Sierra Leone, West Africa. And I had the opportunity um, to do field work in West Africa, in particular in a place called Bo, for 2 consecutive years. That opportunity allowed me to facilitate a teacher's workshop, which was entitled Teachers Training Teachers, with Sierra Leoneans from around the country. Uh, During that workshop, I was able to uh, assess the teacher's needs, so a needs assessment. I also had the opportunity to visit their locales and also see for myself some of the challenges. And so, in helping these teachers acquire materials, because their physical infrastructure was still facing challenges, um, such as some places, some schooling happened up in what they call up country. So those were places that were a bit more remote, and therefore students would not come to a single place. Teachers often went to the students' um, cities. Um, so that was one challenge that teachers had to overcome. The other was teachers having the time to advance their skills. And so we discussed their own professional development. And so having 2 years in West Africa on the ground during the summer, 3 weeks at a time, working with the teachers, preparing their materials, facilitating a training in which they use their materials on the site with their classes. They revise their materials, so their reading books, their presentations. That allowed me to come back here to New York City and to also use my work with those teachers to help New York City teachers develop their own curriculum materials.
Wow. It's an amazing experience. And have you had so much time as well? Oh, good. Do you have some?
Yes, so there were definitely three main points that helped that transition happen from my work in Sierra Leone to my work here in New York City. We were definitely able to empower teachers to engage their communities. Uh, we created, so there was this constant display of creative student-centered curriculum, and they also had the opportunity to share their commitment to developing their curriculum with others around their country. Because these workshops brought in Sierra Leone's, again from around the country.
Great. Thank you. And I love the connection too about work, what you're able to bring back to New York with the work and with the curriculum as well. And so you've talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to ask even more. And thinking about how the program impacted the way that you looked at your career at the time, and did anything change for you after you graduated from the program?
Mhm. So when I think about how the program impacted my work, first off, it reassured me that I'm in the right place. There was a time where I considered if I acquire the ability to navigate conflict and to resolve it in a way that's beneficial to all those involved, that I might go into leadership. And I decided to ask myself a question. Is it possible that leadership could still entail that I maintain my classroom presence? Was there such a thing as teacher leadership? Was there a pipeline for teachers to go into teacher leadership roles? And at this time, there was not. And so, although there wasn't, I decided to use, um, one of the skill sets learned in the program, which was like envisioning what could be a possible next step. So what that looked like was I, did a brainstorm. I talked with my current administrators, and I asked them, uh, could I present a presentation to them? And once they understood that I wanted to share with them my experiences or what I see lacking for teachers in their school, by that time they were open to hearing from me due to my commitment to helping them um, unpack their own school's mission and vision. So I did a training just for the administrators. And in this training, I outlined what are some options in the school that additional support could be beneficial. And with an exchange of ideas, over a course of about 4 weeks, we did a couple of brainstorming sessions. And I was able to come up with almost to redesign my own role within the school. And so what did it look like? That gave me a chance to visit other classes and share with the teacher in the moment what practices were working. It led me to facilitate teacher professional development sessions um, so that teachers had a space to share with their colleagues what was working, why they made shifts in their teaching practices, and most importantly, how they sustained those shifts. So I wanted to further this conversation outside of the classroom. So I found the organization entitled Educators for Excellence. And Educational for Excellence allowed me to participate in a teacher action research project. And through that project, we wrote a policy paper. And the policy paper was around 21st century teacher education and development. What does that look like? And that allowed us to revamp and present to New York State a plan to develop a teacher leadership pipeline for those that are currently in the classroom who have shown a commitment to learning and also a commitment to student achievement. So it created a profile of a pool of teachers who consistently show that students' reading levels were increasing, for example, that their engagement was increasing, and these teachers were allowed to go into high need schools if they wanted to and train educators on how to successfully use new materials, how to successfully engage scholars through higher level questioning, as well as how to manifest for themselves and a commitment to their students' knowledge.
Thank you. And all organizations, but really specifically, schools are really specific ecosystems. And so it sounded like you were being able to present and bring more into the school in different ways. So piggybacking off of what you just said, what does commitment, or even sometimes the idea of loyalty to an organization you have been involved in for so long, how does that evolve or look after you've gone to a program like NECR, honed your skills, and developed yourself as a conflict resolution practitioner? Did dynamics change? And if so, how did you deal with them?
That's a great question because teachers are quite loyal to each other, especially, in communities where teachers have taught for years, they're taught in the same grade. And so they have definitely developed a strategic way of outlining the successes in their classroom and more importantly, how they were intervened when those successes were not coming about in a way that they so desired. Um, Teachers oftentimes see themselves as a collective in which they share resources and they oftentimes empathize with each other. Many suggest the same master's programs to attend and people to connect with. So it is a network within a network. So one of the challenges I faced wanting to maintain that social capital and still become a change agent was tapping into what teachers thought were like their non-negotiables. So if there were any changes within a school's curriculum or within a school's demands and perhaps say, for example, their grading policy, I always tried to take the time to listen to what the teachers were saying. And then using those I statements for example, letting them know I also feel that, changing the curriculum in a year could be quite stressful for our students, for example. Um, I invite you to come into my classroom so that I can show you how this change has been beneficial for my students. And at the same time, I remain very transparent about my own vulnerabilities. So I would still communicate with them that I too also experience, frustration. And here's some language that I've used to help me convey that frustration to either my coach, my personal coach, or my direct supervisor. And so seeing me actually use the skills before I started to label what these skills are, before I said, this is me reframing, this is me actively listening, paraphrasing, because that could possibly come across in a way that would appear quite adversarial. And so I decided to intentionally listen. And I did reflect back what they were saying without using the terms. But my key place on change was always having an open door policy, always saying, well, come into my classroom. You're welcome to see me both struggle and what do I do to overcome those struggles? And then, what do I do to establish myself to anticipate those struggles beforehand? After seeing me become successful in what they defined as successful, it was then that I was able to become a lot more open about what the skill set entailed and why I thought that it was life changing, life changing for me. And so my trajectory physically didn't change. I still remained in the field of education. And at the same time, my ability to influence my school's culture changed because I built that social capital. I built that buy-in. People said, Kalika is trying some new ideas out. They seem to be working. Let's find out why. And of course, it's nothing like the literature. This program has great books. So I would share excerpts from the Change Handbook, the book of intervention strategies. I would often share snippets from my own work in Sierra Leone, and that also helped them understand that I'm committed to using this work, and at the same time not leaving them behind. We actually are moving forward together.
It sounds like you're also doing a lot of leading by example. So that's really lovely to hear about. Thank you. And not to change topics too much, but when you were sort of introducing yourself, giving an overview of all of the things that you do, you had mentioned some organizations. That you do work with some organizations. So I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about who you're working with now, what you do with them, and how you connected with them, even?
Yes, absolutely. And so I still keep in contact with the Friends of Sierra Leone. The Friends of Sierra Leone is a nonprofit organization composed of Peace Corps volunteers that served in Sierra Leone, both since the 1970s until currently 2008. With that organization, I have had the opportunity to chair their education committee. Currently, I act more as an advisor and providing insight into the scope of what I think is happening on the ground with Sierra Leone. But I maintain that contact with the Friends of Sierra Leone so that I can consistently track the development of teachers there as they continue to share with them their work in the field. Um, so that is one organization of Friends of Sierra Leone. The other organization is the Institute for Mediation and Conflict Resolution, which I spoke briefly about. So through the Institute for Mediation and Conflict Resolution, they allow me to network with the following. So the Build a Block. The Build a Block is basically a neighborhood coalition. And so actually tonight in precinct 49 at 6:30, there the Bronx is a Build a Block meeting or gathering. It's an opportunity for police officers that are consistently interacting with members, so homeowners, renters, business owners, schools. They're consistently assigned to the same areas so that they get to know all the community stakeholders. They have these are like open forum nights in which resident neighbors and business owners, they just kind of come together and share in a very pragmatic way any issues directly with these consistent police officers that already patrol the neighborhood. So what's quite fascinating for me to partner with Build the Block is that I've attended meetings and actually spoke to members of the community about mediation, what mediation entails, and how this work is accessible. Even during this time, we still facilitate mediation online. So we have virtual mediations. We also let them know that these services are facilitated by highly trained individuals. So those that have undergone basic mediation training and apprenticeship programs. And we also let them know the array of conflicts that can be resolved. And most importantly, we let them know that we're not attorneys. And so here's an opportunity where they become the decision makers in resolving their own conflict, whether it be landlord tenant, tenant tenant. Yes. So I'm definitely a fan of partnering essentially with the police department and doing so through this avenue of knowing and articulating concerns and really stepping in the middle, letting the police officers know that if there are some complaints that come to you that you find appropriate for uh, myself as a member of a community dispute resolution center, we're definitely here, we're definitely available, and we show up to their meetings and we speak about our service. An additional partnership I still have is with my brother's keeper. So my brother's keeper, I learned about their work at Spring Valley High School, and so that was an opportunity in which I partnered with the principal, there, the assistant principal, and she and I, in addition to other colleagues, um, she received a grant, and so myself and my colleagues, we assisted her in helping to establish a mentoring program for young men between the ages of like 14 and 18, so high school age students, so that they had positive ways to discuss issues within their life with a trusted adult. Um, we facilitated this trusting situation by actually bringing in volunteers. We helped to train those volunteers so that they knew how to establish healthy mentoring relationships. So I've had an opportunity to also partner with New York State's mentoring program as well in order for them to effectively work alongside my brother's keeper of their network, in particular in Spring Valley. And last but not least, so the New York City Department of Education. So special education is a topic that's constantly changing, and I believe for the best. And so I have a chance to partner with them as a mediator, so that cases of special education that involve either the student or the family, either being a little unclear about the services that their child is receiving, or moreover, the services that their child is not receiving, and they want to make that known that that's problematic, and take an active role in resolving what's happening that is prohibiting their student from receiving mandated services. Special education mediation is an avenue that brings together the support team at a school. So perhaps the school psychologist, the school's special education teacher liaison, and the family. Sometimes also the social worker may be part of this team. It brings them together so that the parent in a safe space can discuss why it's so necessary for their student to receive these services. And the school has a safe space to respond to the parent before this becomes an unnecessary legal issue. And they both have an opportunity to work towards a solution.
How often do you have cases to mediate for the DOE?
Yeah. So I would say pre-COVID, so pre 2019, um, we were able to see about 5 mediation cases a month. Typically, those cases would start in December, as we found that there was a trend, and that trend was that most students that we dealt with seemed to have their, it's called an annual review. So this was an opportunity in which students could, well, not only could, but their services are revisited. Meeting is held, and the child, their family, and the teachers can decide if these additional services are still needed. Um, And so we found that those annual meetings typically would start in December that reviewed the previous year's um, justifiable services. Um, and so initially for a while, we were getting about four a week or four a month, which could average out to four a week. We also believe that that could have also been attributed to a backlog of cases of schools actually revisiting a student's um, plan to determine if this again the services, whether that's speech services for a student, physical therapy services, additional reading services. Um, we often found that there was a backlog, and so schools were trying to get caught up, and if they weren't able to obtain a person to meet those needs that were stated in this document called an individualized educational plan, um, then sometimes once ourselves as a mediation center encountered that problem, we realized that it wasn't that the school didn't quite not want to, for example, fulfill the services. It's that there was a backlog of getting the proper individuals to meet the needs of that student. And so um, that again tend to happen in December after schools had got started, and all instructional positions are typically hired and in place by December.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. It's always interesting to hear about the details, and thank you for explaining like a little more about what it looks like. And can you tell us actually more about your approach to community advocacy? And maybe what should people do if they want to advocate for a group or a cause? Because I think there are a lot of people out there who have strong feelings sometimes, but don't necessarily know how to get started or what that actually looks like. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Right. So absolutely. So how does one really tap into um, these services? How does one really get started in changing their personal space, or meaning changing their own personal network? So I would say the first is to be honest with oneself. Um, in this program, in NECR program, um, one of the first um, ideas that I solely subscribe to, I wholeheartedly subscribe to, is that conflict is inevitable. And so um, once someone just realizes that there's a situation, whether it's external or internal, we often advise people to first off be honest, recognize that um, something is not right for you. The second thing that we do, at least to ensure that people know that mediation services are available, for example, or as well as even conflict coaching, is we really have to go out into the community. And so, that entails that we make contact with, for myself, with the Bronx Borough Office. And so we are constantly in contact with their community liaison, so that she often will send to us what are events happening around the Bronx. Um, and we're very we try to be as right unbiased as possible. So if there's an event happening with a faith-based organization, we're there so that we could go and meet the people and begin to inform the people of where we are and the services that we have. Um, we've been able to share our space in our office. Right now, we're doing this remotely, but we've been able to invite someone in. Family Kind is an organization that we are attempting to build a relationship with. So we are attempting to have them come and speak to individuals that have shared their concerns with us. So oftentimes people, if we don't get to them through a community event, they find us through other organizations. Um, in addition to that, people often hear about us through word of mouth. So, in the Bronx, the IMCR is the oldest community dispute resolution center in New York State. And so through word of mouth, we have found that many of the people that find us have heard about us from a friend or through a neighbor. Um, we've also been privileged in that judges are now um, encouraging individuals to pursue an alternative dispute resolution process. And so I would encourage anyone to also ask your local, um, if you find yourself in a position where, judges assisting you, that person could also give you additional resources. So the term ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, is a lovely term to convey to a lawyer or a judge. Um, and last but never least, we also have people that find us through our social networking. So we have a Facebook page, we have a developing Instagram page. Our next step will be to develop a Twitter account. The impact and the influence of social media um, is one that the IMCR has recently um, really decided to use in quite strategic and really productive ways. So we're ensuring that we include that information on our flyers, on our handouts. When we do go and speak to community organizers, or we go out and speak to leaders in these communities, that any physical resource we share, our business cards, also has these social media pages so that people can find us and engage in our services.
That's great, thank you. And even though I have many, many more questions, I want to make sure that we give our attendees an opportunity to ask some questions. So I will ask one more
Okay.
and then we'll open it up. And so obviously you are here with us this evening, which is so wonderful. And we're so happy that you are sharing your story and and what, what you've been up to since you graduated, all of the things you have, I should say. And so, what can you tell us too about why you choose to remain connected to the program's faculty, and sort of the mission of the NECR program as well?
Absolutely. And so it's so integral, so important for me to be able to consistently redefine my skill set and having the ability to look at conflict outside of oneself, to be able to, for myself, um, check check my own emotions, and to articulate those in ways that help people understand what I'm either struggling with or what I firmly believe in. Helps me navigate personal and professional life, and I find that that is just so unique in any educational programming. And so if, which I have, in continuing to remain connected to the NECR program, I'm not only becoming um, a resource myself, but even more so, I'm constantly finding ways to use my skills to either acquire about what are new opportunities on the horizon, and then you know use those um, possibilities in my own life. I find that this program has been quite a relationship builder, and so here's a program that it is a natural extension of being a conflict resolution practitioner. Um, that my work is twofold. It's not singular. I'm not a person that is only receiving. It's just so instrumental and important to me that I also find ways to give back. Um, and so that's one reason why remain committed. It's ensuring that I'm constantly am learning, sharing, and vice versa, sharing with the program what life is like in the field. And then in addition to that, I enjoy being able to tell others about the work of the program. And so if I remain connected to the program, I can better articulate, well, here's what the program is doing. When I started with the program, the idea of field work was definitely being crafted. And so now field work during your studies has been a reality for quite some time. And if I didn't remain connected to the program, that I could not find that information maybe sometimes in a way that I could convey it to someone that's interested in. So my speech gets clearer. My ability to tell someone, oh, the NECR program can definitely, perhaps help you meet that need that you have. And I think that's done so well in our program when I engage in face-to-face interactions, attending events as often and as feasible. Um, I've never found a program that offers such a close knit feel with such broad talent, and it would be a disservice to myself and to um, really anyone that wants to make the world a better place to not, constantly share what is happening at NECR and why it might be beneficial for their growth, personal and professional, to seek out some opportunities in the program.
Well, thank you for all that you do, and yeah, we're so happy that you are a part of now the alumni network. Of course, one of the first members of the alumni network, I should say. So thank you for creating a really solid and strong foundation for the rest of us who have followed in your footsteps. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
no. And at this point, if any of our attendees have questions, feel free to put them in the QA box. And while you're thinking of those, actually, I can ask a question too. This is another, let's rewind. um,
I like the rewinds.
yes, rewind. If would you be comfortable sharing sort of even before the program when you first got into just the field of education and what drew you to teaching and to education?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I knew I was coming to New York City for that purpose only. Um, when I moved here having a job assignment in the Bronx and wanting to instruct young people. And so remaining in education has taught me that the world constantly needs someone who can pivot and at the same time pivot in a way that is fair. Is fair and is equal. So educators, we like to use terms um, that might only resonate with other educators. And so what being a teacher for me has enabled me to do was to find varied terminology so that I can make authentic connections with people. Teaching keeps me constantly learning, seeking answers, hoping to never find a final answer, but an answer that leads me to an answer. So, although I teach students, in many ways, I am often the student, particularly when I'm willing to share with um, individuals within the school how I'm able to remain dedicated. So, dedicated as defined by changing a lesson plan, for example, the night before, um, deciding that using Zoom to facilitate a reading workshop, I might need to find some webinars myself to support me acquiring that skill. And so I enjoy the constant challenges. I enjoy that every day does not look the same. Um, it requires that I'm consistently asking myself, what do my objectives for the day look like, and asking myself, how do I know? And that's what great make this program so great, because the intervention strategies that you use um, throughout writing, say for example your capstone, I remember using appreciative inquiry. So, being able to understand and to embrace what has worked while simultaneously considering what could be next steps. And, that's what I feel like I go through on a daily basis. Because many times what worked yesterday, in the way that I unfold a lesson for the same group of students, may not work. So remaining in the classroom allows me to be a support for others that are still learning. And it allows me to share my growth and my experiences with a wide network of people. Because I'm, as you said earlier, I'm walking and living the talk. So in walking and living by example, there's nothing like increasing buy-in through um, saying and doing what you believe. And people they see it, they comment, and I like being an influencer. So
Mhm.
continuing to be in a classroom allows me to influence teachers, parents, and administrators. And I get to stay in the middle. I get to be um, a stakeholder that's both, as you would say, a primary and in many ways a secondary stakeholder. So
Yeah,
that keeps me motivated.
absolutely. And it sounds like too, with you talked earlier about the importance and the emphasis that you put on having buy-in of the stakeholders around you as well. That's, also something that is wonderful to show students how to do for themselves too. So thank you for sharing that. And I do want to ask you, because I noticed you've mentioned this a couple times and it even got into several of your slides, I think. But could you tell us more about the Change Handbook, what it is, and how you use it, and if it's a tool that other people might find useful?
Yes, absolutely.
I promise this is not a plug from their publishers.
Exactly. Me too.
Yeah.
We co-sign on this. I happen to have it behind me. All right. So the title's probably backwards, however. So
No, it's good.
the Change Handbook. The subtitle literally says the definitive resource on today's best methods for engaging host systems. Um, I use it in a way to consider how can I bring people together um, that have different ideas and more importantly, different ways of um, meeting their goal and their vision actually coming to fruition, actually being manifested. Um, and so I may not always, as one person, have a chance to see these different methods play out. And so this handbook is fascinating and a wonderful, really tangible resource because I can then use this table of contents and say, oh, this is my need or this is my desire. And so I've used it to facilitate board meetings. So I chair the board of directors at the IMCR. And before I introduce a new partnership that I want to develop, I use the book to oftentimes formulate, questions um, that allow me to unveil maybe some of the concerns that individuals may have, or even moreover, maybe not concerns, but it can help me clarify what are others' necessities, what makes others comfortable. Um, During teacher trainings in school, so my staff or my fellow colleagues that are also on staff with me, there are about 60 of us here, um, and so larger groups planning. I mentioned feature search earlier, but I really like this idea of scenario thinking. It's a planning method, so that I'm able to adequately be productive during this time. I'll use this resource to help me script out. So it could tell me time frames. It can remind me of the ideal people, the ideal audience that would respond well to a method or a strategy or intervention idea. And so it really is a toolbox, a go-to resource that I use both in my work as a chair in the classroom and with facilitating teacher development here at work.
Thank you so much. And I love that you had it right there. I'm not surprised because it's incredibly practical and really useful. So I'm happy we had the visual. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we only have about a little less than 3 minutes left. And I think the rest of the questions are a little more substantial. So I'm just going to, my final question of the evening for you would be, are there any, final thoughts that you have for us or any last thing you want to share to wrap it up?
Yes. So again, I would say that change is inevitable, and there's nothing like being a change agent. It requires that you know yourself, and what this program has taught me was who am I? There's nothing more telling for me than to find out who I am than when I have to respond to a problem. And so the practical skills, as you mentioned, are just so significant. To be able to take a class, um, learn a skill, and then apply it the next day. And that's been the trajectory of my work and why even the Change Handbook is still so fundamental to my practice, um, is so significant. And so, what I would say to anyone out there listening is embrace conflict. It's not something negative, it's what you do to use conflict to create change in your networks. And everyone has a network: family, um, workplace, um, place of worship. Everyone has a place and an audience where you can bring about positive change. And there's nothing like what the world needs and what people need is change that is positive.
Well, you are certainly an agent of change, and thank you so much for just sharing everything. I'm incredibly inspired, and also going to look up a couple more of the organizations that you shared. It was really great to know about. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you to our attendees as well for joining us this evening. And thank you again, and I hope everyone has a good, safe rest of your day.
Thank you.